All right. Welcome, everybody, to this week's VARC Solutions Bookkeeping Academy. Thanks for joining. We are going to talk today about the fascinating topic of inventory assemblies versus groups. And really, this is a conceptual discussion because QuickBooks Desktop has the ability of managing inventory much more so than QuickBooks Online. And because of that, in QuickBooks Desktop, you can create an inventory part, you can create a non-inventory part. That's not special. QBO can create inventory parts and non-inventory parts. But within QuickBooks Desktop, you can also create what are called inventory assemblies, or you can create what are called groups. QuickBooks Online doesn't have the same inventory assembly functionality. It does have an inventory part type called a bundle, which is basically the equivalent of a group in QuickBooks Desktop. So the key takeaway that I want to kind of share with you, and I'll start sharing my screen here, is that if you are trying to help a client and whether it's helping them with their inventory setup, their item list, or maybe we're doing a migration from desktop to online. These are things that are ultimately become incredibly important, very important considerations, especially in transitioning. And so the key is, if you've got a desktop client that is using inventory assemblies, those folks, if they were ever to try to move to QuickBooks Online, they're going to be missing a feature. They're not going to have the ability to create and maintain inventory assemblies, but they can use what are called groups or bundles. And so part of what I want to make sure that everybody understands here is, like, what are the differences between groups / bundles and assemblies, and why should you care? If you have any questions, of course, feel free to put those in the chat or just unmute yourself and say it out loud, and we'll go from there. Okay. All right, so I'm sharing my screen right now, and I've got QuickBooks Desktop here. I've also got a Google Doc, and I'm going to also, while I'm kind of dancing around here on the screen, I'm going to also open up the QBO test drive, and I'm going to show you what QBO would look like on some of these things as well. All right. So just give me a second and I will have a few of these things loaded and ready to go. Okay, so let's, what I'm going to do first off, I've got this Google Doc and I just want to kind of talk through conceptually what we're talking about here. So if you're trying to sell individual products or components together as a bundle, then so let me restate that. If you're trying to sell individual products or components together as a bundle, that's one decision. Or are you trying to build a finished product that you wish to sell based on components? Okay, so let's take McDonald's as the example. Okay, I'm going to McDonald's and I want to buy a cheeseburger. Well, behind the scenes, somebody is taking 2 buns, 1 piece of meat, and a slice of cheese. And of course, there's other things, but let's just keep it simple. And they're taking those components of a cheeseburger and they're building a finished cheeseburger. Okay, that would be an assembly. I'm taking the components out of inventory. I'm building one finished good called a cheeseburger. And what I'm selling to my client is a cheeseburger. Okay, I'm not selling the client 2 buns, a piece of meat, and a piece of cheese. I'm selling them a finished product, which is called an inventory assembly in QuickBooks Desktop. Okay, so I'm selling 1 cheeseburger. Okay, and it's built from the components. Okay, a group, however, could be more like a Happy Meal. Okay, so it includes an already built cheeseburger, but it also includes a Coke and it also includes a large fries. And I'm really just selling those 3 things together as a bundle to my client. Okay. So conceptually, does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions before I get too much farther along? Seeing none. Okay. So this can be a little bit confusing. Okay. It can be confusing. So if you think of it like a gift basket, you know how like you go to the silent auctions and then there's, you're walking around the tables and they've got those gift baskets, and inside those gift baskets, they've got 2 bottles of wine, there's a box of cookies, there's a block of fancy cheese and crackers. That could be a group or it could be an assembly. It really could be either one. It really depends on how you're selling it or how you're maintaining or managing it in inventory. So think of it like this. If you only sell the gift basket, it could be an assembly. In other words, you've got a warehouse or you've got an office and you've got all these bottles of wine that are inventory. You've got all of these blocks of cheese and crackers and all these boxes of cookies, and they're in inventory right now. You've got 100 bottles of wine, you've got 100 boxes of cheese, that kind of thing. And the question is, are you actually going through a manufacturing process where you build those gift baskets, and in inventory, all you want to see is that you've got 100 gift baskets, versus saying, I still want to see that I've got 100 boxes of cookies and 100 bottles of wine and 100 blocks of cheese. Okay. So if I want to do a manufacturing process where I, at the end of the day, don't see the component inventory, but I only see the finished good, the gift baskets, that would be an assembly. Okay. However, if I still want to see the individual components in inventory, even though I've quote unquote built 100 gift baskets, I still want to know that I've got 100 bottles of wine and 100 blocks of cheese and 100 boxes of cookies. Conceptually, that would be more like a group. As I go, I'm just kind of putting those into a gift basket and saying, here's this gift basket. But what I'm really selling is 2 bottles of wine, a box of cheese, and a box of crackers. Okay. So what's key here is that QBO can't do that assembly or that manufacturing process. It can only do the group or bundle concept. Okay. So I'm going to show you QuickBooks Desktop real quickly, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you just a few examples on the Word document or the Google document there. But just conceptually, let's take a look at this. In QuickBooks Desktop, if I go to the item list, okay, in that item list, I've got these different types of parts, right? I've got inventory parts, I've got maybe service parts, I've got non-inventory parts, etc. But I also have the ability of creating these things called assemblies. And so I've built out 2 examples. I've built out an assembly example and I've built out a group example. Okay. So for example, let's look at this assembly number 1 that I've created. And what you'll notice is that it's got a name. It's assembly 1 or finished good number 1, whatever you want to call it. And in that assembly, I'm telling it, here are the components that are getting built into that finished good. And I can tell it how many of each thing are included in that. And so right now I'm just using 1 of each. But let's say, for example, that it was 2 bottles of wine, 1 box of cheese, and 4 boxes of cookies. Well, I could say it's 1 of these, 2 of these, 4 of these. And when I go build that product, it's going to take the individual components out, multiplied by the number of finished goods I'm building. Okay. So give you an example. That's assembly number 1. It's made up of those 3 things. In QuickBooks Desktop, if I go to build assemblies right here, I can actually come in and say, I want to build this finished good. Okay. And here's the items that are included in that. Here's the quantity on hand. And if I said, well, I want to build 15 of those and hit tab, it actually is going to tell me how many I need of each component from the quantity on hand to build. And when I hit build and close, it's going to remove those from the quantity on hand of the components, and it's going to build 15 of the finished goods. So going back to my items list, I currently have 9 on hand. Okay. And just for kind of a footnote here, springs, I've got 1544, and I've got finished good 9 here. If I go build and close, I now have 24 finished goods because I've literally built those new components. And if I go to that spring, instead of 1540, whatever it was, it's got 1529. So it actually took those out of stock to build the finished component. Okay. That's the manufacturing process that QBO doesn't have. That's the assembly process that QBO doesn't have. And instead, QBO can do the package or the bundles, otherwise known as groups. And so the good news is Desktop also has the ability to do bundles or groups. They just call them groups. And conceptually, it's the same concept. In other words, I can say, I want to create a group item. I can say that group is made up of these things, the bottles of wine, the boxes of cheese, the boxes of whatever. And I can still say how many of each are included in that. But the difference being, if I was to go create an invoice to a client and I wanted to put in this, if I wanted to sell them this group, notice in reality, what I'm doing is I'm not selling a finished good called a group. I'm selling one spring, one anchor, and one anchor adhesive. So it's still on the invoice line iteming, is that a word? Line iteming the individual components because I haven't assembled them into one finished good. But I can still say, okay, well, I want to sell 15 of those groups and it'll do the math. But the question is, if I was to go run a sales by item report, am I going to see sales of 15 groups, or am I going to see sales of 15 springs and 15 anchors and 15 anchor adhesives? If I'm selling a group, it's going to actually tell me that I've sold 15 springs, 15 anchors, and 15 anchor adhesives, not that I've sold 15 of that group. Okay. Whereas if I sold an inventory assembly, I've already manufactured the finished good. If I was to then sell that finished good called assembly, notice it doesn't list the components because there are no components. It's been built into a finished product, and it's only going to show me that I've sold X number of that assembly. Okay. So that is sort of like the functional part of how that works. The Google document that I have here somewhere, give me one moment. Where is that thing here? Okay. Yeah. So the Google document, by the way, that I can share is it just really kind of outlines that same thing that I just talked about. You've got inventory assemblies. It's got a sales price, income account, COGS account, asset account. I've got the components. I can go build those quantities. It shows you that when you go build the assembly, it's literally taking the components out and building the finished good. Same thing on the sales side. Okay. All right. So let's look at QBO for a second and let's see how that compares. So let me pull up QBO and share that on the screen real quick. All right. So in QBO, if I go to my products and services list and I go create a brand new something, the question is, what type of thing is it? Notice you can still do inventory and non-inventory. You can do services. There is no assembly, but you could do a bundle. So it works kind of the same way, right? I could say, hey, I'm building a bundle. Okay. Well, let me clarify my wording. I'm not building a bundle. I'm creating a bundle. Okay. And in that bundle, I can say, well, that includes one of these. And I can say it includes 3 of these things. Okay. And I could say it includes another thing down here. Okay. Whatever those things are. And I can now go sell that bundle. Okay. Called that bundle. The difference is same, just like we talked about in Desktop Enterprise. If I'm selling a bundle, what I'm really doing is I'm selling the components together versus building a finished product that I'm then selling to a client. So that's basically how that works. That's kind of the differences between those things. Let me stop here and just ask if anybody has questions, if there's any discussion that you guys want to have on this topic.
I have one comment.
Okay, go ahead.
the groups and bundles, whether you're in QBO or desktop, you can actually display those products or not.
Yeah.
So it is a handy function if you just want to show gift basket as opposed to 2 bottles of wine, cheese, crackers, whatever it was.
Yes, exactly. See, I think there's the print items in group, but I don't think that's the same thing, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. That either shows on the printed invoice or not
Yep.
whether it has those different components or not.
Yeah,
It's
perfect.
always going to show on your screen.
Yeah. So if I sell 3 of those groups and I go print preview, whatever.
It's going to
Yes,
get you on every
yes.
one.
Okay.
Yeah, so
print
that
items
has the
in group.
components.
Yep. Whereas if I went back to, did I just close out of QuickBooks? I must have just closed out of QuickBooks. Hang on. Okay, I think I just closed out of QuickBooks. Okay. Yes. Otherwise, if I uncheck that box, it would just say group, right?
Correct.
Perfect. Good. Anybody else? Questions, thoughts, comments?
No questions, but this is really cool so far. So as always, thank you for sharing.
Absolutely. So hey, let's talk about one more part of that. So I mentioned at the very beginning, if somebody is trying to migrate from QuickBooks Desktop to QuickBooks Online, well, if they're doing anything significant with inventory, that migration can be challenging, right? It's especially challenging if they've got assemblies. So Angie, just as an example, Tina, you guys do a lot of migrations. When you're looking at the files, during your pre-migration assessments, are you looking at the item list or the inventory list to see if they've got any assemblies? Are you asking them any questions about that?
Always.
Okay. And so what do you tell them if they've got inventory assemblies?
Well, they won't convert. They will be turned into bundles, and they may want to consider a third-party inventory system like SOS or Sin7 or Fishbowl or whatever that will give them those inventory assembly capabilities.
Perfect. Perfect. Yep. And obviously that could be a deal breaker, right? If somebody's like, oh gosh, I've got hundreds of assemblies. Maybe I've even got nested assemblies, right? Where I've got, I've created this assembly number 1 and assembly number 2 and assembly number 3, and that also gets assembled into another finished good called, whatever, big machine. That is a challenge, right? So yeah, there's other solutions like Sin7, Fishbowl, Katana, other more robust inventory solutions that can do that. But that would obviously be a more elaborate type of migration where we're not just migrating desktop to online, we're also separately having to manage the inventory migration, which obviously complicates things. But yeah, it's good stuff to know. Perfect. Any other thoughts? Any other questions, comments? All right, seeing none. Thank you for everybody for coming today. Oh, let's see. Hang on. Hang on 1 second. There's a comment. I'm trying to mute my phone while we're doing this. Jennifer had a comment. She said she did one migration like that, but they had abandoned their assemblies in previous years by outsourcing their manufacturing and production. Okay, yeah. So basically, they ignored the fact that they had assemblies so that they could outsource that. And I guess in their system, they were only managing the finished goods. Makes sense. Makes sense. Cool. Thanks, Jennifer. Okay, thanks for attending. Thanks for coming. And as always, really appreciate your questions, your comments, and your participation. And we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank
All right.
you.
You're welcome. Bye. My Zoom is hung up.
Yeah, it froze. Even error on the left in red.
Yeah.
What's the deal? Why is it?
It happens when I launch remote desktop, and since I close the remote desktop window, it kind of does this little thing.
Yeah, mine does the same thing when I'm in remote. I just didn't know you were in remote.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's what my desktop, my QuickBooks desktop is in remote. So now I'm just waiting for screens to finish flickering so I can actually have control of my computer back. So right now my camera's still on, my mic is still on. Just waiting.
Got it.
Well, this window is frozen, so everybody's probably left.